What if I told you that the greatest conqueror in human history began his journey as an outcast, a boy betrayed and left to die in the wilderness by his own people? Before we delve into the life and conquests of none other than Genghis Khan, the legendary warrior and ruler, it's crucial to picture the setting where these monumental events unfolded, ancient Mongolia. When we hear the word Mongolia today, images of endless steppes, rolling plains, and semi-desert landscapes stretching to the horizon often come to mind. We envision vast expanses under a huge blue sky, piercing icy winds, and nomadic yurts scattered across the steppe, like islands of civilization in this wild and untouched world. In ancient times, these lands undoubtedly looked much the same. However, life here was even more brutal, demanding incredible resilience, stamina, and adaptability from those who sought to survive and thrive in these unforgiving conditions. Imagine a vast territory spanning thousands of miles, from the majestic Altai mountain range in the west to the boundless plains of Manchuria in the east. To the north, these lands bordered the immense coniferous forests of Siberia, promising endless resources, yet harboring countless dangers. To the south, they were bounded by the harsh and arid Gobi Desert, presenting an insurmountable natural barrier that tested even the most seasoned travelers. The climate in these parts has always been known for its severity and unpredictability. Long and unbelievably cold winters, when temperatures plummeted to extreme lows, were followed by short but oppressively hot summers, with a scorching sun that burned everything alive. Spring and autumn flew by rapidly, bringing abrupt weather changes and strong winds that could lash out at the steppe at any moment, sowing chaos and destruction. For the inhabitants of these lands, the weather was not just a quirk of nature, but a vital factor determining their survival. Favorable weather conditions could ensure a rich harvest and a well-fed winter, while a harsh winter or a drought-ridden summer could lead to famine and the death of livestock. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, as many more interesting videos await you, and we'll continue onward. In such extreme conditions, an agrarian society requiring a stable climate and fertile soil could not form. Therefore, the Mongols, like their ancestors many centuries before them, chose a nomadic way of life, which allowed them to most effectively utilize the limited resources of the steppes. Nomadism was not a coincidence or a whim, but the only way to survive and thrive in these harsh conditions. The Mongolian tribes constantly moved, following the pastures needed for their numerous herds of sheep, goats, horses, camels, and cattle. These animals provided the Mongols with literally everything they needed for life: meat and milk for food, wool and hides for making clothing, shoes, yurts that served as their homes, and household items necessary for everyday life. Life on the steppe was hard and fraught with dangers. Therefore, the Mongols were compelled to become excellent horsemen, skilled hunters, and fearless warriors. They did not have permanent cities and fortified fortresses like settled peoples, but they possessed incredible mobility, iron discipline, and unwavering unity that allowed them to survive successfully in harsh conditions and cope with any difficulties, be it severe weather, attacks by wild animals, or clashes with hostile tribes. They lived in yurts, light, quickly assembled, and disassembled dwellings that were ideal for constant movement and allowed them to change location as quickly as possible, depending on the season and the availability of pastures. It was in such conditions that the unique Mongolian culture formed, with its core values of freedom, tribal unity, mutual assistance, and deep respect for ancestors, passed down from generation to generation. Ancestors were of immense importance to the Mongols. They believed that the spirits of ancestors were constantly nearby, watching over them, guiding them, and helping their living descendants in difficult times. Reverence for past generations became an essential part of the culture of the Mongolian tribes, and each person's lineage was of great significance. The more noble and glorious a person's ancestors were, the higher their status in society and the more respect they enjoyed among their tribesmen. Genghis Khan himself, who was given the name Temujin at birth, was a member of the noble Mongolian clan of Borjigin, tracing its origin to the legendary ancestor Berta, which in Mongolian literally means grey wolf. According to ancient legends, passed down orally through many generations, Genghis Khan's ancestors were not just ordinary people, but mighty and proud beings possessing special strength, wisdom, and connection with nature. These legends were passed down from generation to generation and became an integral part of the Mongols' self-identification, emphasizing their uniqueness, chosenness, and special role in history. From his earliest childhood, Temujin grew up listening attentively to stories about his glorious ancestors and their heroic deeds, which inspired him, shaped his personality, and laid the foundation for his future accomplishments. He grew up in a harsh environment where strength, cunning, resourcefulness, and loyalty to the tribe were the keys to survival and success. Even at a young age, he realized that his life should be a worthy continuation of the glorious line of his ancestors, and that it was he who was destined to unite the disparate Mongolian tribes into a single powerful nation capable of conquering the world. Thus, the roots of the future Mongolian Empire lie in the harsh and boundless steppes, where a unique nomadic way of life, a culture of strength, unity, and reverence for ancestors was formed. All this prepared the ground for the birth of a great man who was to forever change the course of history, Temujin, later known to the world as Genghis Khan. But what was the great conqueror's childhood like? What difficulties did he have to overcome on his path to power? It is to him and his amazing destiny that we now turn, delving deeper into this captivating and epic story full of intrigue, betrayal, heroism, and incredible accomplishments. Temujin was born around 1162 in a nomadic encampment situated on the picturesque banks of the Onun River in the heart of ancient Mongolia. He came into the world in the family of Yesugei Batar, the brave and respected head of the Kiad Borjigin tribe, one of the many Mongolian clans that trace their lineage back to the legendary grey wolf, Berta. The name Temujin, given to the newborn child at birth, had a deep symbolic meaning and meant blacksmith, or one who forges iron. This name was chosen by Temujin's father for a reason. Shortly before the birth of his son, Yesugei Batar won a fierce battle against a noble and influential warrior named Temujin Uga, and decided to perpetuate his glorious victory by naming his son after the defeated enemy. What significance did this name have for the fate of the future ruler? And what trials awaited young Temujin ahead? Yesugei, Temujin's father, was undoubtedly an influential figure in Mongolian society. His name resounded due to his military successes and bravery. However, his power was not absolute. The world of the Mongolian steppes was full of contradictions. Tribes constantly clashed with each other, disputing territories, pastures, and the right to leadership. In this turbulent world, stability was only a fleeting illusion, and every day could bring new challenges and threats. Temujin's childhood was spent in an atmosphere of constant confrontation and intertribal strife. Despite this, the first years of his life can be called relatively prosperous. He grew up surrounded by a loving family, felt the protection of his father, and learned wisdom from his mother. However, when the boy turned 9 years old, his life changed dramatically, and he faced the harsh reality of the Mongolian steppe. During one of his trips across the steppe, Yesugei stopped at the camp of the Tatars, with whom he had long-standing and strained relations, marred by past grievances and conflicts. But at that moment, a fragile and temporary truce was in effect between them, concluded for mutual benefit. Despite this, the Tatars, known for their cunning and treachery, treacherously poisoned Yesugei, violating all agreements and demonstrating their true colors. Weakened and exhausted, he managed to return home to say goodbye to his family, but soon died from the effects of the poisoning, leaving his family on the verge of complete ruin and despair. The death of the head of the clan in the harsh Mongolian steppes meant inevitable collapse for the entire family, as support, protection, and well-being depended solely on the authority, strength, and influence of the male leader. After the tragic death of Yesugei, the tribesman, driven by self-interest and fear, immediately turned away from his widow, Hoelun, and her children, considering them weak, helpless, and incapable of independent existence in this cruel world. Temujin's family was simply abandoned to the mercy of fate in the vast and harsh Mongolian steppe, deprived of livestock, food, and any hope of survival. Now, Hoelun, a wise and brave woman, and her children were forced to struggle for survival completely alone, relying only on their own strength and resourcefulness. They constantly experienced hunger, cold, and fear of possible attacks from hostile tribes roaming the steppe in search of easy prey. Together with his mother, Temujin learned to hunt, fish, gather edible plants and berries, and other essential skills for surviving in the wild. In these harsh conditions, his character quickly hardened, developing the will, patience, and ability to make difficult decisions necessary for survival and future success. One of Temujin's most striking and brutal early life episodes involved a conflict with his half-brother, Bekta. While sparked by a hunting dispute, the conflict truly represented a deeper rivalry for family leadership, which grew more evident each day. Temujin, only about 13 years old at the time, realizing the need to protect his family and assert his authority, killed Bekta with an arrow, demonstrating to those around him that he was prepared to make tough decisions and fight for his place in this harsh survival of the fittest world. This event marked a turning point in Temujin's life, after which he became the unspoken head of the family, despite his young age. Shortly after this tragic event, young Temujin faced another severe ordeal that could have cost him his life and forever altered his destiny. He was captured by the hostile Taijut tribe, who feared his growth and sought revenge for past grievances inflicted by his father, Yesugei. The youth was shackled in heavy wooden stocks, which restricted his movements, caused constant pain and humiliation, and prevented him from escaping. The Taijuts planned to kill him, ending the threat posed by Yesugei's descendant once and for all. But thanks to his cunning, courage, and the help of some secret supporters who sympathized with him and believed in his future greatness, Temujin managed to make a daring escape. During his escape, he hid in dense thickets of reeds and concealed himself for a long time in the icy river water to throw his pursuers off his trail, until they, exhausted by the long search, abandoned the chase and lost hope of finding the fugitive. This escape further cemented the legend of his courage, determination, and extraordinary willpower among the Mongols, who admired his ability to survive in the most improbable conditions. After returning to his family, Temujin began systematically and purposefully gathering like-minded individuals around him, people who, like him, had been exiled from their tribes, deprived of support, and lacked hope for a better future. These individuals saw in Temujin a strong leader capable of uniting them, protecting them from enemies, and changing their harsh fate. He began forming his first units, which were distinguished by unprecedented loyalty, iron discipline, and a readiness to fight for their leader until their last breath. Among his earliest supporters were loyal friends and future prominent generals, Borchu and Gelme, who went through all the trials with him, shared all the hardships of nomadic life, and became some of the most important figures in his subsequent conquests. One of Temujin's key figures during his youth was Jamuka, his blood brother and best friend, with whom he shared a strong bond of friendship and understanding. Their friendship seemed unbreakable and capable of withstanding any trial. They exchanged vows of brotherhood, mixing their blood and swearing eternal loyalty to each other. However, a hidden rivalry for power, influence, and leadership over the tribes gradually began to emerge between them, growing more apparent each day. Their paths would later diverge, and they would transform from best friends into mortal enemies, fighting each other for dominance in the Mongolian steppe. But it was this complex friendship, full of love and hate, betrayal and loyalty, that played a crucial role in shaping Temujin as a leader who could learn from any situation, analyze his mistakes, and make wise decisions based on his experiences. Gradually, thanks to his charisma, relentless persistence, military successes, political wisdom, and ability to find common ground with diverse individuals, Temujin began to gather more and more supporters, drawn to his strength, confidence, and belief in a bright future. The Mongolian tribes, previously fragmented and constantly warring among themselves, weary of endless strife and bloodshed, saw in him a person capable of bringing peace, order, and justice to their lands, ending internecine wars, and creating a unified, mighty state capable of withstanding any enemy. After Temujin managed to gain authority, gather his first loyal followers, and create a combat-ready army, his path to absolute power was far from complete. Now, he faced an equally difficult and responsible task: convincing the numerous and feuding Mongolian tribes that uniting under his leadership would be the only path to their prosperity, security, and greatness. But who dared to challenge him? And what alliances did he have to forge to consolidate his power? Among Temujin's first and most dangerous adversaries were the Merkit tribe, dangerous and formidable neighbors who had a long and bloody conflict with Temujin's family, rooted in the distant past. It was the Merkits who kidnapped his beloved wife Borte in his youth, causing one of the first and most serious wars in his life, which tempered his character and taught him to value the fidelity and devotion of his loved ones. With the help of his loyal ally and blood brother, Jamuka, as well as his future powerful ally, Wang Khan, also known as Togrul Khan of the influential Karaite tribe, Temujin organized a well-planned and daring campaign, defeated the Merkits in several fierce battles, and triumphantly returned his wife Borte, restoring his honor and solidifying his authority among the Mongols. But what other trials and battles await Temujin on the road to uniting Mongolia? This impressive victory not only strengthened his authority and influence among warriors, but also demonstrated to all the tribes of the steppe that the young leader was not merely capable of surviving in harsh conditions, but also possessed sufficient strength and determination to avenge his enemies for the offenses inflicted and to restore justice. However, Temujin never sought to win solely by force of arms and brute military power. On the contrary, he skillfully employed subtle diplomacy, forging advantageous political alliances, establishing kinship ties, and skillfully playing on the contradictions between various tribes. One such crucial and strategically important alliance was his alliance with the mighty Karaite Khan, Togrul, also known as Wang Khan. This influential figure was one of the most authoritative and respected rulers in the Mongolian steppes. His word carried great weight, and his decisions significantly impacted the political situation in the region. He had previously supported Temujin's father, Yesugai, and therefore Temujin, showing respect and gratitude, called him his adopted father. This alliance significantly raised his status among other nomadic leaders, strengthened his position, and provided him with the necessary political support in the early years of his desperate struggle for power, when he had to prove his right to leadership and assert his authority. However, political alliances in the steppe were extremely fragile, often changing under the influence of various circumstances and the personal interests of the leaders. Soon, Temujin had to face betrayal from Wang Khan himself, the man he considered his adopted father and loyal ally. The reason for the break in their friendly relations was Temujin's growing power and rising authority, which began to cause alarm, envy, and jealousy in the old and ambitious Khan. As a result, the hidden animosity and distrust between them gradually developed into open conflict, which subsequently escalated into a large-scale and bloody war for dominance in the steppe. Despite the numerical superiority of Wang Khan and his numerous allies, Temujin demonstrated outstanding abilities as an experienced strategist and talented commander, showcasing his knowledge of military affairs, his ability to lead troops, and his skill in making the right decisions in critical situations. He defeated the Karites in several major battles and forced Wang Khan to flee the battlefield, which soon led to his tragic death at the hands of hostile tribes. One of the most complex and dramatic episodes on his path to power was the struggle with his longtime friend and blood brother, Jamukha, with whom he shared a bond of strong friendship and mutual respect. Their alliance, based on common goals, mutual support, and sincere affection, gradually evolved into a fierce competition for leadership, power, and influence over the Mongolian tribes. Jamukha, a charismatic, ambitious, and talented commander, saw himself as equal to or even surpassing Temujin, and could not reconcile himself to the role of second-in-command in this alliance. Soon, a protracted and exhausting war began between them, culminating in the Battle of the 13 Sides in 1187. In this battle, Jamukha achieved a temporary victory over Temujin's forces, but made a fatal mistake that cost him the support of many of his followers. He brutally dealt with the captured warriors of Temujin, displaying excessive cruelty and bloodthirstiness, which caused disgust and condemnation among his own warriors. Many of them, disappointed in their leader, began to defect to Temujin's side, attracted by his more just, humane, and respectful treatment of warriors and prisoners. Temujin masterfully capitalized on these situations, demonstrating to leaders and ordinary warriors that he was capable of governing people fairly and wisely, not only with force and cruelty, but also with honor, dignity, and respect for every individual. It was his humane approach to warriors, his ability to empathize, and his respect for opponents that often tipped the scales in his favor, attracting more and more supporters to his side. Another significant and important episode in his struggle to unite the Mongolian tribes was the war with the Naimans, one of the most powerful and warlike steppe peoples of that time. It was in the bloody battle with them in 1204 that Temujin finally cemented his reputation not just as a strong warrior, but also as a talented, far-sighted, and wise leader capable of leading people and achieving his goals. The victory over the Naimans showed the remaining tribes that resistance to Temujin was pointless and futile, and the majority of steppe leaders preferred to voluntarily join him, acknowledging his superiority and agreeing to submit to his authority. Thus, by the year 1206, thanks to a series of brilliant battlefield victories, successful diplomatic negotiations, skillful politics, and personal charisma, the Mongol tribes were almost completely united under the rule of Temujin. He had proven his right to leadership and earned recognition among the Mongols. The long-awaited moment had arrived to formally establish his status as the sole supreme ruler, possessing unlimited power and capable of making decisions binding on all tribes. To this end, the Great Kurultai was convened, a congress of all noble Mongol clans and tribes, which took place in a picturesque location called Delun Boldog, at the source of the sacred Onon River. All the major leaders of the Mongol tribes, who recognized Temujin as the most worthy, wise, and just among them, capable of uniting them and leading them to prosperity, arrived at this Kurultai. It was here, before the entire Mongol people, that Temujin was given a new name, Genghis Khan, which literally means great oceanic ruler, symbolizing his boundless power, greatness, wisdom, and ability to unite all peoples around him. This event became pivotal and historic, as for the first time in centuries of infighting, bloody wars, and constant conflicts, the Mongol tribes finally recognized themselves as a single nation, united by common goals, culture, and history, under the leadership of one strong and wise leader. But what marked the reign of the newly proclaimed Genghis Khan? And how did he plan to use his people's newfound unity? However, the Kurultai of 1206 signified more than just the unification of the Mongols into a single state. It symbolically marked the beginning of a completely new era in Eurasian history, an era of great conquests that would forever change the political, economic, cultural, and religious landscape of a vast portion of the continent and have a tremendous impact on the course of world history. Genghis Khan was proclaimed not merely a ruler, He became a symbol of unity, strength, greatness, and a bright future for all Mongols who believed in him and were ready to follow him to new victories and achievements. But where were the eyes of the newly minted ruler directed? What lands beckoned him with their glory and riches? After the scattered Mongol tribes, who had previously roamed the vast steppes and lived according to their established but localized customs, finally united under the iron fist of Genghis Khan, the newly proclaimed ruler faced a colossal task: to create not just a temporary alliance, but a strong, centralized, and effectively governed state. This was a task requiring not only military strength, but also a deep understanding of the organization of society and its management. Previously, the Mongols, as free as the wind, obeyed only their clan traditions and the authority of elders. But now they were to become part of something larger, unified, and whole. To bring this ambitious vision to life, Genghis Khan, possessing an extraordinary strategic mind, developed a truly unique system of laws, administrative governance, and military organization, which together became the cornerstone of his rapidly growing empire. At the very heart of this system was the famous Mongol Code of Laws, known in history as the Yasa. The word Yasa itself embodies a profound meaning and can be translated as decree, commandment, or inviolable law. This set of rules, covering virtually all aspects of Mongol society, from nomadic life to warfare, was not merely a collection of precepts, but rather a comprehensive system of values and guidelines. It is interesting to note that the Yasa was not a single written document that could be read and studied. Instead, its provisions existed in the form of concise, clear, and, importantly, strict instructions that were deliberately memorized. This made the Yasa accessible to every member of society, regardless of their literacy, and ensured its widespread dissemination and strict observance. At the heart of the Yasa lay simple, yet profound and understandable principles: absolute and unwavering loyalty to the Khan, as the embodiment of the unity and strength of the state; deep respect for elders, the custodians of wisdom and traditions; inviolable respect for the brotherhood of warriors, bound by blood and common victories; and finally, iron discipline as a prerequisite for achieving success in any endeavor. A special place in the Yasa was occupied by laws on mutual assistance and support, a kind of code of honor for nomads, who understood that survival in the harsh steppe conditions, where every day is a struggle with nature, would simply be impossible without mutual aid and solidarity. The Yasa imposed a strict ban on theft, lies, betrayal, and other serious crimes that undermined the foundations of society and destroyed trust between people, punishing them mercilessly and irrevocably. For example, for such heinous acts as betrayal, desertion from the battlefield, or treason against the Khan, there was only one punishment: imminent death. The significance of the Yasa for the Mongols cannot be overstated. It became not just a code of laws, but a kind of sacred symbol of order, stability, and justice, the compass that pointed the way in the new united state. Thanks to the Yasa, ordinary people knew what the Khan and the state expected of them, what rights and obligations they had in this new society. This set of rules allowed Genghis Khan to create a cohesive and disciplined people, ready to follow their leader without hesitation to any exploits and conquests, a people united by a common goal and belief in the justice of their cause. So, we have examined how the Yasa became the cornerstone of Mongol statehood. But what else allowed the nomads to conquer half the world? No less important factor in ensuring the resounding success of the Mongol Empire was its army, one of the most powerful, organized, and disciplined military forces of its time. Genghis Khan's army was distinguished not only by the courage of its warriors, but also by extraordinary discipline, a clear hierarchical structure, and absolute loyalty to its supreme ruler. The basis of the army was made up of tens, hundreds, and thousands of warriors, each of which had its own commander responsible for their subordinates. Thus, the smallest combat unit was a squad of 10 warriors, The Arban, led by an experienced and proven squad leader. 10 such Arban made up 100, led by a centurion who possessed not only combat experience but also organizational skills. 10 hundreds formed 1,000, a Minghan commanded by 1,000th, already an experienced commander capable of making independent decisions on the battlefield. And 10,000 warriors made up a Tumen, the largest military unit, commanded by a particularly trusted and experienced commander, a Tumenbashi, who had the right to make strategic decisions and lead his troops into battle. This strict and clear structure ensured not only iron discipline, but also high mobility and controllability of troops, allowing the Mongol army to act quickly and efficiently in a variety of conditions. Each warrior knew exactly his place in the ranks and his tasks, and the commanders had clear instructions and were fully responsible to the superior officers for the fulfillment of the tasks assigned. This organization allowed Genghis Khan to effectively manage a huge army, which could quickly and clearly respond to any changes in the situation and act even in the most difficult and extreme conditions, whether it be snow-covered mountains or scorching deserts. Genghis Khan paid particular attention to the personal qualities of his commanders. He chose officers not for their noble origin or wealth, but solely for their abilities, military experience, and personal merits demonstrated in battles and campaigns. Thanks to this approach, talented commanders such as Subutai, Jebe, and Mukhali appeared in his army. These outstanding military leaders came from different social strata and tribes, but all were united by absolute loyalty to the Khan, outstanding military talent, and willingness to serve their empire to the last drop of blood. This meritocracy, when the most capable and worthy rise to the top, became one of the key features of the Mongol army and one of the factors in its crushing victories. But is it possible to hold such a huge empire only by military force? The Mongol state was governed not only by the force of arms, but also by a clear and effective system of civil administration. Genghis Khan appointed trusted people to be responsible for collecting taxes, organizing the supply of troops, and maintaining communication between the regions of the empire. A developed network of messengers operated everywhere, the famous Yam postal service, which allowed for the rapid delivery of orders and messages over vast distances, connecting remote corners of the empire into a single whole. Postal stations were located at a distance of 1 day's journey from each other, which allowed messengers to continuously change horses and move with incredible speed, delivering important messages in the shortest possible time. This communication system played a huge role in the management of the empire, allowing Genghis Khan to respond promptly to any events and maintain order in vast territories. Despite the severity and strictness of the laws, Genghis Khan was fair to ordinary people. Despite the fact that punishments for crimes were extremely severe, ordinary people highly valued the yasa for its clarity, consistency, and uniformity for all, regardless of social status. Whether you were a simple warrior or a high-ranking commander, the rules were the same and immutable. In Genghis Khan's state, people could count on the protection of their rights as long as they remained true to the laws and the Khan. Such justice, albeit harsh, helped strengthen trust in the authorities and maintain order in society. Thus, it was the internal structure of the state, and not only military power, that became one of the key factors in the success of the Mongols. Clear organization, strictness of laws, impeccable discipline, and fair treatment of ordinary people allowed Genghis Khan to create a state capable not only of keeping huge territories under control, but also of successfully conquering new lands, expanding its possessions to unprecedented scales. So, we have found out that the internal structure of the state became the foundation for future conquests. But how did the process of conquest itself take place? What strategies and tactics did the Mongols use to conquer half the world? We will talk about this next time. Now that the foundation of a unified Mongol state had been laid and firmly strengthened, and internal affairs were in order, Genghis Khan's gaze, like an eagle soaring over the steppe, turned far beyond his native Mongol lands. His first and most ambitious target was the rich, prosperous, and seemingly unshakable Jin Empire, which stretched across vast territories of what is now northern China. This state, created by the militant Jurchens, a people known for their courage and martial prowess, had existed for more than 100 years and possessed a huge army, impregnable fortresses, and a complex, extensive system of governance. However, despite all its external power and apparent invulnerability, the Jin Empire, like a tree riddled with internal rot, was experiencing a serious internal crisis that undermined its strength and made it vulnerable to external threats. The ruling elite, mired in luxury and pleasure, was weakened by incessant internal conflicts, treacherous palace intrigues, and the pervasive corruption of officials who thought only of their own enrichment, forgetting the interests of the state. This oppressive atmosphere created ideal conditions for a Mongol invasion, as if opening the gates to a fortress that no one was defending. Genghis Khan, as astute as a fox and as patient as a tiger, perfectly understood the situation, carefully monitored the unfolding events, and bided his time for the most opportune moment to deliver his crushing blow, from which the Jin Empire would never recover. In the year 1211, when the political situation reached a critical point, the Mongol army, numbering around 100,000 battle-hardened warriors, crossed the borders of the Jin Empire like a raging torrent bursting its banks, beginning its historic and fateful offensive, which was destined to change the course of history. The first major clash between the two armies occurred at the strategically important Yehuling Pass, which, like a watchtower, rose above the surrounding area, controlling vital lines of communication. Chinese troops, significantly outnumbering the Mongols in both manpower and weaponry, and confident in their invincibility, expected a quick and easy victory that would halt the advance of the barbarians into the heart of the country. However, Genghis Khan, a brilliant strategist and tactician, had carefully prepared for this decisive battle and skillfully used his famous feigned retreat tactic tested in many battles. The Mongols deliberately retreated, as if luring foolish rabbits into a trap, drawing the overconfident Jin troops into a prearranged ambush, after which they suddenly attacked the enemy from three sides, surrounding and completely crushing them. This crushing victory, achieved through cunning and military ingenuity, marked an important psychological turning point in the war. Chinese generals and ordinary soldiers, accustomed to easy victories over other enemies, realized for the first time how dangerous and unpredictable their new adversaries were, the Mongol warriors who knew no fear or pity. After this resounding success, the Mongol army, like an avalanche cascading from the mountains, began a rapid advance through northern China, capturing cities and fortresses one after another, encountering little serious resistance. The main reason for the Mongols' dizzying successes was their incredible mobility, which allowed them to cover vast distances in the shortest possible time. The Mongol army, like the wind, could make lightning-fast transitions of hundreds of miles, bypassing powerful fortifications and attacking weakly defended places, sowing panic and destruction in its path. Furthermore, Genghis Khan, understanding the importance of information, paid special attention to reconnaissance, like a spider weaving its web to catch prey. His numerous messengers and scouts studied the enemy's territory in advance, gathering valuable information about troop deployments, fortifications, food supplies, and other important details, providing the army with accurate and timely data, allowing them to make the right decisions in any situation. One of the major challenges the Mongols faced during their initial campaigns in China was their lack of experience in taking well-fortified cities, surrounded by high walls and defended by numerous garrisons. However, Genghis Khan, possessing not only military talent, but also the ability to quickly learn new things, quickly found a solution to this problem. After capturing many Chinese artisans and engineers who knew a lot about siege warfare, the Mongols were able to adopt from them the art of storming and destroying fortifications. They quickly learned to use a variety of siege weapons, such as battering rams, which breached walls, siege towers, which allowed them to fight on par with the defenders, and catapults, which showered the enemy with a hail of stones, thanks to which even the most powerful fortresses began to fall one after another, like overripe fruits plucked by a strong wind. A key event in the first stage of the conquest of the Jin Empire was the capture of its capital, the majestic city of Zhongdu, known today throughout the world as Beijing. The Mongols besieged this vast city as if tightening their troops around it like a ring in the year 1214. The siege was arduous and cruel, lasting several long months and accompanied by famine, disease, and a shortage of water among the defenders and residents of the city, who suffered and died from hardship and privation. Finally, in the spring of 1215, the residents of Zhongdu, exhausted by suffering and despair, having lost hope of salvation, agreed to open the gates to the Mongol troops, believing the conquerors' flattering promises to spare their lives and property. However, after the surrender of the city, Genghis Khan, not accustomed to forgiving his enemies, decided to punish the inhabitants for their long and stubborn resistance, which had cost the Mongol army many lives. The walls of the city were partially destroyed, as if showing everyone that there was no longer any protection here. A significant part of the city was looted, and many residents were either killed without any pity or taken prisoner to become slaves in the distant Mongol steppes. This demonstrative cruelty, aimed at breaking the will to resist and instilling fear in the hearts of enemies, had a strong psychological effect, forcing the remaining cities and regions of northern China to capitulate much faster and without active resistance, not wanting to repeat the sad fate of the destroyed and plundered Zhongdu. However, it is important to emphasize that the fall of Zhongdu in the year 1215 did not mean the definitive end of the Jin Empire at all. The remaining part of the court and the army, gathering their last forces, retreated south, moving the capital to the city of Kaifeng, where the Jurchens continued to stubbornly resist the Mongol invasion, hoping to defend their lands and restore their former greatness. The war between the Mongols and the remnants of the Jin Empire continued for nearly 2 more decades after the capture of Beijing and was filled with many bloody battles and sieges. Only in the year 1234, after the death of the great Genghis Khan, his successors, who continued his work, were able to finally conquer the Jin Empire, completely subjugating its territories to Mongol rule and incorporating them into their vast empire. The reasons for the Mongol army's resounding success in these campaigns were clear and obvious. The Mongols were far superior to the enemy in mobility and speed of movement, like the wind rushing across the steppe, possessed unsurpassed discipline and strict organization of the army, which allowed them to act cohesively and effectively in any situation. Their experienced commanders skillfully used intelligence data, quickly made strategic decisions, and used psychological warfare against the enemy, instilling fear and uncertainty in its ranks. Many Chinese cities and regions surrendered virtually without a fight, not wanting to repeat the fate of the destroyed Zhongdu and preferring to save their lives and property. The Mongol troops also effectively used captured resources and technologies, quickly learning new skills and tactical techniques, which made them even more formidable and invincible. It was this combination of factors that made possible such a rapid and successful advance of the Mongols deep into the territory of northern China, like an unstoppable flood, sweeping away all obstacles in its path. Thus, Genghis Khan's first eastern conquests not only demonstrated to the world the vast military power of the Mongol army, but also instilled in the hearts of the Mongols the confidence that they were capable of subjugating even the most developed and powerful civilizations that existed on Earth. The conquest of northern China became a solid foundation for further campaigns and conquests, which forever changed the map of Eurasia and opened a completely new era in world history, full of wars, destruction, and great achievements. So, the Mongols conquered northern China. What happened next? Where did the great conqueror turn his gaze? What new lands and peoples fell under the hooves of his horses? After a significant part of northern China ended up in the hands of the Mongols, and their power in East Asia was strengthened like a stone wall, Genghis Khan's gaze, like an eagle soaring in the sky, turned west towards the rich and fertile lands of Central Asia. Now his next target was the prosperous and powerful state known as the Khwarezmian Empire, which stretched across vast expanses. At the beginning of the 13th century, Khwarezm Shah Muhammad, an ambitious and power-hungry ruler, possessed vast territories, including modern-day Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Iran, and parts of Afghanistan and Kazakhstan. This empire was famous for its high culture, rich cities such as Samarkand, Bukhara, and Urgench, which were centers of science, art, and crafts, and was the most important center of world trade at that time, linking East and West. Initially, Genghis Khan, being a far-sighted politician and strategist, did not plan a direct and bloody war with Khwarezm. His initial intention was to establish strong diplomatic and mutually beneficial trade relations with this rich and developed state, since the Mongols, despite their militancy, perfectly understood the importance of trade and the exchange of cultural achievements for the prosperity of their state. In the year 1218, Genghis Khan sent a large caravan to the city of Otrar, located on the border of the two empires, laden with valuable gifts and goods, accompanied by respected ambassadors, offering Khwarezm Shah peaceful trade and good neighborly relations. However, the Khwarezmian governor of the city of Otrar, a treacherous and greedy man named Inalchuk, suspecting the Mongol merchants of espionage, made a tragic mistake that had fatal consequences for his country. Driven by greed and suspicion, he plundered the rich caravan, appropriated all the valuables, executed innocent Mongol merchants, and insulted the ambassadors, violating all existing diplomatic norms and customs. Upon learning of this treacherous act, Genghis Khan was deeply offended and enraged, viewing the attack on his ambassadors as a personal insult and a blatant violation of their agreements. Being a man of honor and principle, he could not let this go unpunished. Instead of punishing his overzealous governor and attempting to reconcile with the Mongols by offering compensation for the damages, Khwarezm Shah Muhammad only worsened the already complex situation by executing the surviving Mongol diplomats, thereby definitively closing the path to a peaceful resolution of the conflict. Now, war between the two empires had become inevitable, like a bolt from the blue. In response to this unprecedented audacity, Genghis Khan, gathering his generals and carefully weighing all the circumstances, planned a large-scale and merciless military campaign that became one of the most devastating and bloody conquests in world history. In the year 1219, a vast Mongol army, numbering around 200,000 battle-hardened warriors, invaded the lands of Khwarezm like an unstoppable avalanche, rapidly advancing across the boundless steppes and arid deserts of Central Asia, sweeping away all obstacles in its path. The Mongols, employing their favorite tactics, advanced in multiple directions simultaneously, sowing chaos, panic, and terror among the inhabitants and troops of Khwarezm Shah, who, not expecting such a rapid invasion, could not adequately react to the lightning attacks and could not organize an effective defense. The first major target of the Mongols was the very city that had caused the war, Otrar, which had served as the apple of discord between the two empires. The siege of the city, despite the desperate resistance of the garrison and residents, lasted almost 5 long months. In the end, Otrar fell under the onslaught of Mongol troops, and its treacherous governor, Inalchuk, was captured and executed by the Mongols in the most cruel and sophisticated manner. As a symbol of punishment for greed, betrayal, and violation of the laws of hospitality, molten silver was poured down his throat, agonizingly ending his life. Then, the Mongol troops, like predatory beasts, rushed further into the territory of Khwarezm, towards the largest cultural and commercial centers, such as Bukhara and Samarkand, famous for their opulent palaces, mosques, and libraries. In the year 1220, the Mongol army approached the walls of Bukhara, surrounded by high ramparts and defended by a large garrison. Despite the desperate resistance of the defenders, the city quickly found itself in a tight siege ring, and unable to break through the encirclement and receive reinforcements, soon surrendered to the mercy of the victor. The Mongols, like locusts, burst into the city, and although Genghis Khan, showing some mercy, initially spared the inhabitants, ordering that artisans, scholars, and clergy be left alive, the city was brutally plundered, many houses burned to the ground, and a significant portion of the population taken prisoner to become slaves in distant lands. Next to fall was Samarkand, one of the most beautiful and wealthy cities of that time, known for its scholars, poets, and skilled artisans who created masterpieces of art. The siege of the city was also short-lived, thanks to the numerical superiority of the Mongols and their skill in conducting siege warfare. Despite the tenacious and well-organized defense, the Mongols, using sophisticated and powerful siege engines with which they showered the city with a hail of stones and breached the walls, burst inside and captured the city. The capture of Samarkand was accompanied by enormous destruction and countless casualties. Most of the city was ravaged and razed to the ground. The population was partly slaughtered and partly taken into captivity, never to see their native places again. However, the most dramatic and tragic moment of the war was the fate of the capital of Khwarezm, the majestic and impregnable city of Urgench, surrounded by powerful walls and considered one of the most fortified cities in the region. The Mongols approached it in the year 1221. Urgench, which became the last hope of the Khwarezmian Empire, was the largest and most fortified city in the state, and its siege, which became a symbol of fierce resistance, lasted several long months, accompanied by fierce and bloody battles for every street, every tower, and every house. When the city, exhausted and bled dry, fell under the onslaught of Mongol troops, the losses on both sides were enormous, and the Mongols, as if in a fit of rage, subjected it to complete destruction and merciless fire, turning the prosperous city into ruins and ashes. The fall of Urgench became a symbol of the complete and final collapse of the Khwarezmian Empire, which fell under the blows of the Mongol conquerors. Khwarezm Shah Muhammad, having suffered a crushing defeat, fled west, trying to save his life, and soon died of a serious illness in exile, losing power, prestige, and the vast empire he once boasted of, leaving behind only ruins and ashes. The consequences of the Mongol invasion of Central Asia were truly catastrophic and had long-term consequences for the region. Many large cities, which were centers of culture and trade, were practically destroyed or severely ravaged, and the population decreased several times over, becoming victims of wars, famine, and disease. The great culture and prosperity of these lands, which reached their peak during the reign of the Khwarezm Shahs, were interrupted, and it took many decades, if not centuries, to restore the previous level of development and well-being. So, the Khwarezmian Empire fell under the blows of the Mongol conquerors. What lessons can be learned from this tragic story? What predetermined such a sad outcome? And where did the Mongols, who knew no defeats, direct their victorious troops next? Among other things, the Mongol conquerors systematically exported skilled artisans, talented craftsmen, outstanding scientists, and other gifted individuals to the territory of their vast empire. This process significantly accelerated the dissemination of cultural and scientific achievements to various corners of their subject lands, promoting the exchange of knowledge and technology between different civilizations. However, The Mongol invasion also had far-reaching consequences that ultimately had a significant impact on all of world history. Central Asia was firmly incorporated into the colossal Mongol Empire, and the legendary Great Silk Road, this vital artery of trade and cultural exchange, came under the complete control of the Mongols. This created unique conditions for the unhindered movement of goods, ideas, and cultural values between East and West, which in turn had a profound impact on the further development of all of Eurasia. Having completed the conquest of Central Asia and crushed the Khwarezmian Empire, the Mongol troops, emboldened by victories, moved further west, deep into previously unexplored territories. Now their sights were set on the vast expanses of Eastern Europe and the boundless steppes of the Black Sea region, inhabited by many different peoples and tribes who were not yet aware of the terrible force that was approaching their borders. What fate awaited these lands under the onslaught of the looming threat? The great Genghis Khan himself did not take direct part in the European campaigns, but he entrusted command to two of his most talented and proven commanders, Jebe and Subutai. These military leaders possessed extensive experience and had repeatedly demonstrated their outstanding skills in numerous military campaigns, proving themselves as strategists and tacticians of exceptional caliber. Under their command was an army consisting of several tens of thousands of Mongol warriors, distinguished by unsurpassed mobility, iron discipline, and an amazing ability to cover vast distances in the shortest possible time, which made them a formidable force on the battlefield. By the early 20s of the 13th century, the Mongols were rapidly advancing through the Caucasus, winning victories over the Alans and Cumans and steadily approaching the borders of the Russian principalities. Soon, disturbing rumors of cruel and mysterious conquerors began to reach Russian lands, causing anxiety and fear among the population. However, the local princes did not yet fully realize the real threat posed by the Mongols, mistakenly believing that they were just another nomadic people who did not pose a particular danger. They could not foresee the incredible power and tactical skill they would soon have to face. Will the Russian princes be able to realize the full seriousness of the looming threat before it is too late? In the spring of 1223, the Polovtsian Khan Kotyan turned to the Russian princes for help, warning them about the appearance of a new, extremely dangerous and cruel enemy, surpassing all those they had encountered before. The Russian princes, driven by a sense of duty and a hope for an easy victory, decided to assist the Polovtsians, believing that they could quickly and decisively deal with the new threat. An impressive united army was assembled, which included troops from the Kievan prince Mstislav Romanovich, the Galician prince Mstislav Mstislavich, as well as warriors from Chernigov, Smolensk, and other principalities, ready to repel the invaders. The Mongols, true to their strategy, carefully prepared for the upcoming battle and skillfully lured the Russian Polovtsian army deep into the steppes, avoiding a direct clash until the most suitable moment arrived. Thus, the Russian Polovtsian troops were drawn deep into the territory, to the banks of a small steppe river known as the Kalka, where, on May 31st, 1223, one of the most dramatic and bloody battles of medieval Eastern European history took place. What fate awaited the united army on the banks of this river? At the beginning of the battle, the Russian Polovtsian forces attempted to launch an offensive, hoping to crush the Mongols with their numerical superiority and decisive onslaught. At first, it seemed that the battle was going in their favor and that victory was near. But soon, the Mongol cavalry launched a swift counterattack, skillfully using their famous tactics of false retreat and sudden flanking strikes, which had repeatedly brought them success in previous battles. Unable to withstand the fierce onslaught of the Mongol cavalry, the Polovtsians were the first to falter and flee in panic from the battlefield, sowing chaos and disorganization in the ranks of the Russian warriors. As a result, the Russian princely detachments found themselves divided and unable to effectively coordinate their actions, making them easy prey for the experienced and ruthless Mongol horsemen, who skillfully exploited gaps in the enemy's defenses. The Battle of the Kalka River ended in a catastrophic defeat for the Russo-Polovtsian forces, turning into a real tragedy for many Russian principalities. Numerous princes and boyars fell in battle or died during the retreat, trying to escape persecution, including Mstislav Romanovich, the Prince of Kiev, whose death was a heavy loss for Rus. Prince Mstislav Mstislavich of Halish, along with his surviving warriors, found himself surrounded in a fortified camp, and after desperate resistance was forced to surrender to the mercy of the victors, trusting their promises. The Mongols assured the prisoners that they would spare their lives, but, disregarding their oath, cruelly executed Mstislav of Halish and his warriors, demonstrating their boundless cruelty and treachery. This brutal massacre made an indelible impression on the entire region, and for many years became a symbol of Mongol ruthlessness and cruelty. What consequences would this betrayal have for the future relations between Russes and the Mongols? Despite the victory, the Mongols did not continue further invasion to the west and deep into Russian lands, limiting themselves to reconnaissance only. The main goal of this campaign was to explore the territory, assess the military capabilities of local states, and gather information about potential adversaries. Having completed these tasks, the Mongol commanders turned back to the steppes to report the information to Genghis Khan and other Mongol leaders. The Battle of the Kalka River had a huge impact on the subsequent history of Eastern Europe, becoming the first serious clash between European peoples and the Mongol threat, and clearly demonstrating how strong, disciplined, and well-organized the Mongol army was. Nevertheless, the Russian principalities failed to immediately learn from the tragedy that had occurred. The princes continued to wage internecine wars and argue for power, weakening their lands and undermining defense capabilities. Therefore, when the Mongols returned 15 years later, already under the command of Khan Batu, the grandson of Genghis Khan, the Russian lands again found themselves unprepared for a much larger and more destructive invasion, which marked the beginning of a difficult and prolonged period of the Mongol yoke. Could Russes withstand a new, even more powerful blow from the conquerors? Furthermore, the Battle of the Kalka River became an important strategic lesson for the Mongols themselves, allowing them to better understand the strengths and weaknesses of their adversaries and improve their tactics of warfare. It was thanks to this battle that the Mongols obtained invaluable information about the geographical location of the lands, potential military resources, and political features of the Russian principalities, as well as neighboring European states. These strategic insights were subsequently used by insightful Mongol commanders in carefully planning future, even larger-scale invasions of Europe, allowing them to implement their conquest plans with greater confidence and effectiveness. Thus, the Mongol expansion into Europe and the tragic Battle of the Kalka River became turning points in history, having a profound impact on the fate of Eastern Europe and marking the beginning of a new era associated with large-scale Mongol conquests and great upheavals that forever changed the political map of the world and the destinies of many peoples. But what's next? What other secrets does the history of Mongol conquests hold? Now that we have thoroughly examined the breathtaking conquests and bloody battles of the Mongol army, let's turn our gaze to another, no less important side of life in the vast Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan's time. The daily life, distinctive customs, and unique culture of ordinary people who, by fate, became part of the greatest state of their time. How did these people live, and what values did they profess? The life of Mongol nomads was inextricably linked to the surrounding nature and determined by the harsh conditions of the boundless steppes, where every day was filled with challenges and trials. The Mongols lived in yurts, light yet sturdy and mobile dwellings that could be quickly and easily assembled and disassembled, allowing them to roam from place to place, following their herds. The yurt was the heart of family life, its hearth a symbol of domestic comfort, warmth, and the unbreakable unity of the family, where each member played an important role. In the Mongol family, each member had strictly defined responsibilities, corresponding to their age and gender. Men were engaged in grazing livestock, hunting, providing the family with food and resources, and of course warfare, protecting their lands and interests. Women, in turn, were responsible for managing the household, raising children, cooking food, sewing clothes, and maintaining order and cleanliness in the yurt, creating an atmosphere of comfort and care. How did these strict duties shape the character and worldview of the Mongols? The Mongols were unsurpassed masters of horsemanship, possessing incredible skill and dexterity. From early childhood, every Mongol child was taught to sit confidently in the saddle, skillfully control a horse, and accurately shoot a bow at full gallop, which made them one of the most formidable warriors of their time. Horses were the main pride of the Mongols and the basis of their nomadic life, providing them with mobility, speed, and the ability to survive in harsh steppe conditions. Warriors often had several horses, which they changed during long campaigns to maintain high speed of movement and combat effectiveness. Horses were not only indispensable combat animals, but also a symbol of high social status, wealth, and prestige. In everyday life, the Mongols wore clothing that was ideally suited to the harsh steppe climate, providing them with protection from heat, cold, wind, and other adverse weather conditions. The clothing was multi-layered, skillfully sewn from durable leather, warm wool, and soft furs, allowing them to withstand the sharp temperature fluctuations characteristic of the steppe region. An important part of the traditional costume were high boots, protecting the feet from cold and dirt, as well as warm hats with fur trim, reliably protecting the head from frost and piercing wind. Although Mongol society is often associated with militancy and austerity, it possessed a high level of culture and art, which flourished even in the face of constant wars and conquests. During the reign of Genghis Khan, various types of art and crafts were encouraged, especially those that were useful for military purposes and daily life, contributing to the development of technologies and improving the quality of life. The Mongols were skilled blacksmiths, creating reliable weapons and durable armor, as well as skilled craftsmen who made beautiful jewelry, household items, and other useful things, distinguished by their beauty and functionality. One of the most revered forms of art in Mongol society was music, which played an important role in the life of every person. The Mongols loved music and singing, accompanying them with both solemn festive events and simple everyday life, creating an atmosphere of joy and unity. Throat singing, distinguished by its unique technique and sound, playing stringed instruments such as the morin khur, a traditional Mongolian fiddle, and performing epic songs about heroes of the past and their great deeds were especially popular. These songs and legends were passed down from generation to generation, shaping the cultural memory of the people, strengthening their identity and connection to the past. Religion in Mongol society was closely linked to the surrounding nature and ancient traditions of ancestors, reflecting their deep respect for the world and beliefs. The Mongols practiced shamanism, believing in spirits that inhabited all elements of nature, in rivers, mountains, trees, and even stones, endowing them with special power and meaning. Of particular importance were the spirits of ancestors, to whom sacrifices were regularly made and who were approached for help and advice in difficult times, hoping for their protection and support. Shamans, who served as intermediaries between people and the spirit world, occupied an important place in society and enjoyed great respect, possessing power and influence. One of the most surprising and progressive features of Mongol society was the unusually high role of women, which distinguished it from many other societies of that era. Despite the fact that men often went on long military campaigns, women stayed at home and for this time became full-fledged heads of households, managing not only the family but also large herds of livestock, servants, and taking care of the household. Mongol women had the right to inherit property, participate in making important decisions, and even influence political issues, which gave them the opportunity to contribute to the development of society. The great Genghis Khan himself often sought advice from the women of his family, including his wise mother Hoelun and beloved wife Berta, listening to their opinions and trusting their intuition. The Mongol family was strong and cohesive, and family ties played a huge role in the life of society. Children were brought up in the spirit of respect for elders, reverence for traditions, and love for their homeland. And the elderly were revered as keepers of wisdom, experience, and knowledge, passing them on to the younger generation. Families united into larger clan groups, and this complex system of kinship and mutual support allowed them to successfully survive in the difficult conditions of steppe life, providing each other with help and support in any situation. Thus, daily life in the vast Mongol Empire was based on a close connection with nature, strict discipline, and deep respect for ancient ancestral traditions. Despite the harshness of the conditions, the Mongols created a rich and distinctive culture, filled with beautiful music, captivating epic stories, and exquisite art. A special place in this society was occupied by women, who possessed rights and influence that many other women of that era could only dream of. Understanding the daily life and rich culture of the Mongol people allows us to delve deeper into why they were able to create such a powerful, viable, and long-lasting empire. This empire profoundly influenced the history of many nations and civilizations, leaving an indelible mark on world history. Now that we have considered the various facets of life in the Mongol Empire, we are ready to move forward to explore other fascinating and vital parts of the great history of the Mongol Empire and its priceless legacy. What other secrets are hidden in the depths of the history of the Mongol Empire? Now, we will turn to the most mysterious and enigmatic part of the story of the great Genghis Khan, to the ancient legends and unsolved mysteries that surround his outstanding personality and incredible destiny, giving rise to numerous questions and assumptions. Despite the availability of numerous historical accounts and documents, the real life of Genghis Khan is still shrouded in many myths, mysterious stories, and incredible legends, which are intertwined with historical facts, creating a unique image of the great conqueror. Even during the great Khan's lifetime, the Mongols treated him with deep deference, genuine respect, and reverent awe, considering him not just an outstanding warrior, a talented commander, and a wise ruler, but a man marked by the heavens themselves, endowed with special abilities and a great destiny. According to ancient Mongolian legends, the founder of the mighty Borjigin clan, to which Genghis Khan belonged, was a legendary grey wolf named Berta Chino and a beautiful doe named Kwai Maral, who, according to the myth, descended from the heavens. From the union of these mystical animals, according to ancient legend, came the great line of Mongol Khans, who were destined to unite the disparate tribes and create a great empire. In the minds of the Mongols, this legend emphasized the special destiny of Genghis Khan, his connection with higher powers, and the supernatural strength that enabled him to perform incredible feats and win victories. Folk tales and legends attributed amazing abilities to Genghis Khan, which went far beyond ordinary human capabilities, endowing him with almost divine qualities. Some legends claimed that he was endowed with the gift of clairvoyance, allowing him to foresee the outcome of battles and the course of events for many years to come, making him an invincible strategist and visionary. Others said that he had the ability to control the weather, causing a storm or clear skies to help his troops during battle, demonstrating his power over the elements. These incredible beliefs strengthened his unquestioned authority among the ordinary soldiers, who were firmly convinced that their great leader was under the special protection of higher powers and that he was destined to lead them to great victories. But perhaps the most famous and mysterious story about Genghis Khan is his mysterious death and the secret of his burial, which still excites the minds of historians and archaeologists. The great conqueror and founder of a vast empire died in 1227 during a military campaign in what is now China, leaving behind many questions and unsolved mysteries. However, The details of his death remain a mystery even to modern historians, despite numerous studies and searches. Some historical sources claim that he died from a serious illness or old age, having reached an advanced age. Others say that the Khan died from wounds sustained in the last battle, showing his bravery and courage. There is also an old legend that Genghis Khan was killed by a beautiful Tangut princess who wanted to avenge him for the destruction of her homeland and the death of her loved ones, which adds tragedy to his image. Whatever version is true, the death of the great Khan was a tragic event about which the Mongols kept silent, guarding the secret from the outside world and not allowing anyone to know the truth about his last days. According to ancient traditions and legends, the location of his burial was strictly classified and carefully guarded so that no one could disturb his peace. The body of the great Genghis Khan was buried in a secret location, deep in the mountains or the endless steppes of Mongolia, and all those who took part in the morning funeral procession and could know the exact location of his grave were mercilessly killed to keep this great secret forever, ensuring that no one would ever know where the great conqueror rests. There are ancient stories, passed down from generation to generation, that by order of Genghis Khan's closest associates, thousands of horsemen deliberately trampled the ground around the burial site to completely erase its traces and reliably hide the final resting place of the great conqueror, making his grave invisible and inaccessible. This secret has become one of the most mysterious and unsolved mysteries in world history, which still excites the minds of scientists and researchers. Despite numerous archaeological expeditions, modern technologies, and persistent searches by historians and enthusiasts, the exact burial place of the great Genghis Khan has never been found, remaining one of the most intriguing mysteries. There are several reasons for this. First, the method of burial and concealment of the site itself was so thorough and well thought out that it left practically no traces, which makes the search incredibly difficult. Second, the local population of Mongolia still has deep respect for the memory of Genghis Khan and considers his grave sacred, avoiding any attempts to search for it so as not to disturb the spirit of the great Khan and not to disturb his eternal peace. There is also an old legend, passed down from mouth to mouth, that if Genghis Khan's grave is found and disturbed, then the world will face great disasters, terrible catastrophes, and untold suffering, which makes it inviolable. This ancient legend, despite its mystical nature, still has a strong influence on people's minds, maintaining an atmosphere of mystery and sacredness around his burial, deterring attempts to reveal its location. Thus, even almost 800 years after the tragic death of Genghis Khan, his fate and outstanding personality continue to be the objects of many legends, myths, and mystical assumptions, which are intertwined with historical facts, creating a unique and inimitable image. His mythical image in the minds of many peoples significantly surpasses historical reality, and the secret of his final resting place remains one of the most intriguing and unsolved questions in world history, continuing to excite the imagination and inspire new searches. It is these tales and myths, shrouded in secrecy, like an invisible thread connecting us to the past, that give the personality of Genghis Khan a unique charm and greatness. They make us, mere mortals, tremble with awe and admiration as we contemplate that even the most powerful ruler, who conquered half the world and left an indelible mark on history, remains an unfathomable mystery, hidden in the mists of time beyond complete understanding. Consider how many unrevealed pages his biography holds, how many secrets are buried beneath the sands of history. With these profound reflections on the transience of all things and the greatness of the unknown, we leisurely move on to the next part of our narrative to continue our fascinating journey through the waves of history and reveal new facets of the amazing legacy of the great Mongol conqueror. But before we move on, let me ask you a question. Are you ready to find out what trials befell the descendants of Genghis Khan after his passing? After the death of the great Genghis Khan, the Mongol Empire faced a complex dilemma that had enormous significance for its future. It was the question of succession, of who would become the new ruler, and how to preserve the colossal power and vast territories that stretched from the distant shores of the Pacific Ocean to the endless steppes of Eastern Europe, united under the Mongol banner. Despite all the wisdom and strategic genius of the late Khan, after his death, the Mongol state faced the first serious threat to its integrity, an internal power struggle that could instantly destroy everything that had been created through hard work. Genghis Khan left behind 4 sons, each of whom was worthy of the throne: Jochi, Chagatai, Ögedei, and Tolui. During his lifetime, foreseeing possible discord and understanding that the issue of succession could become an apple of discord and provoke bloody conflicts, Genghis Khan Miri divided his vast possessions among his heirs, assigning each of them specific territories and lands to avoid future disputes. The eldest son, Jochi, received control of the vast western lands, including the endless steppes of southern Siberia, the vast territories of Eastern Europe, and the lands adjacent to the majestic Volga River. Chagatai received lands in the heart of Central Asia, including the territories of modern-day Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, rich in their cultural traditions and fertile lands. The third son, Ögedei, received control of the central lands located in the heart of Mongolia and northern China, which were key regions of the empire. The youngest son, Tolui, inherited the original Mongolian territories, the cradle of Mongolian civilization, as well as his father's headquarters, which gave him a certain advantage over his brothers. However, despite such a clear and seemingly fair division of lands, even this could not protect the empire from internal disagreements and disputes, which, like a shadow, haunted it throughout its history. But what happened next? How did the power struggle break out, despite all the precautions taken by Genghis Khan? Even before the tragic death of Genghis Khan, his eldest son Jochi unexpectedly died under very mysterious circumstances, without ever ascending to his father's throne and realizing his potential. Ominous rumors of possible poisoning immediately spread around his death, but no real evidence confirming this version was ever found, and the secret of his departure remained unsolved. Jochi's death instantly created a new round of tension in relations between the heirs, because the question arose, who should take his place? Jochi's sons, who inherited his rights, or other brothers who claimed part of his possessions? As a result, after long debates and discussions, at the Great Kurultai held in 1229, Genghis Khan's third son, Ögedei, was elected as the new Great Khan. This choice was a kind of compromise, since Ögedei enjoyed great authority among his brothers and, importantly, was not directly involved in the acute conflicts that took place between the descendants of Jochi and Chagatai, which made him a neutral figure capable of uniting various groups. Ögedei proved himself to be a talented and far-sighted ruler who managed to continue his father's work and strengthen the power of the empire. Under his skillful leadership, the Mongol Empire experienced a new period of economic and cultural prosperity, as well as territorial expansion. Ögedei's reign was a logical continuation of the policy pursued by his great father. He strongly supported the development of trade, expanded the network of roads connecting various parts of the empire, and organized an efficient postal system, ensuring rapid communication between remote regions. In addition, Ögedei led new large-scale military campaigns aimed at further expanding the borders of the Mongol state. Under Ögedei, in the 30s of the 13th century, the remnants of the Jin Empire were finally conquered. The conquest of northern China was completed, and the Mongol troops advanced far into Europe, sowing fear and panic among the local population. The grandson of Genghis Khan, the son of Jochi, Khan Batu, on behalf of Ögedei in 37 to 41 of the 13th century, made his famous Western campaign, during which he defeated the Russian principalities, conquered Eastern Europe, and reached almost Central Europe, plunging its states into awe and horror. But what happened next? Did Ögedei's reign become the golden age of the Mongol Empire, or did new trials and tribulations await it? Yet, despite all these impressive accomplishments and successes, the Mongol Empire gradually entered a new phase of its existence, a phase of gradual fragmentation and growing internal conflicts that gnawed at it from within, like a worm eating away at wood. After the death of Ögedei in 1341, the situation became drastically more complicated. His son, Guyuk, was supposed to be his successor, but at the Kurultai, where this important matter was to be decided, fierce disputes and confrontations broke out between various factions, delaying the election of a new Khan for several years, plunging the empire into a state of uncertainty and political chaos. Finally, in 1346, Guyuk was indeed elected Great Khan, but his reign turned out to be short and not very successful, marked by intrigue and power struggles. After Guyuk's death, power passed to the descendants of Genghis Khan's youngest son, Tolui. His son, Mongke, became the Great Khan, and after him, another son of Tolui, the famous Kublai Khan. It was under Kublai Khan that the empire reached the highest degree of its cultural and economic prosperity, but at the same time, the irreversible process of its disintegration into separate parts began. But how did this happen? Why did the reign of the most powerful ruler in the history of the Mongol Empire become the beginning of its end? Parallel to the rule of these great Khans, individual territories allocated to the sons of Genghis Khan for governance gradually began to transform into independent states, khanates, each pursuing its own interests and conducting an independent policy. Thus, the lands of Jochi turned into the Golden Horde, encompassing vast territories from Siberia to the Black Sea and from the Urals to Eastern Europe, becoming a formidable force that held the surrounding lands in fear. The Chagatai Khanate occupied the central part of Central Asia, where it existed for a considerable time, preserving the cultural traditions of the Mongols and becoming an important center of trade and crafts. The Ilkhanate of the Mongol Empire of Persia, another descendant of Tolui, encompassed the territories of modern-day Iran and Iraq, creating the foundation of the Ilkhanate state, which became an important center of Persian culture and science. These khanates grew further and further away from the central authority, gradually transforming into independent states with their own interests, armies, and a culture distinct from that of the metropolis. By the end of the 13th century, the unified Mongol Empire had effectively ceased to exist as a cohesive state, breaking up into several large khanates, each of which went its own unique way, shaping the course of history in various regions of the world. Thus, the division of lands among the sons of Genghis Khan, despite his foresight and desire to avoid future conflicts, ultimately led to the gradual fragmentation of the once united and powerful empire. The struggle for power between the heirs and their descendants gradually destroyed the unity that had been laid down by the Great Khan and led to the formation of many independent states. And a legitimate question arises. What happened to the legacy of the great Genghis Khan? Was his work consigned to oblivion, or did his ideas and principles continue to live in the hearts of his descendants and in the minds of those who remembered the former greatness of the Mongol Empire? Yet, paradoxically, it was precisely this apparent fragmentation and decentralization that created a unique opportunity for the flourishing of culture in the individual parts of the once united empire. Each of these fragments of the great power was able to preserve and develop the legacy of the great conqueror in its own way, bringing to it its own colors and features. After the tragic death of Genghis Khan and the subsequent division of his vast Mongol Empire into separate uluses, one of the most significant and influential states of the Middle Ages appeared on the political map of the world, the Golden Horde. As previously mentioned, this powerful Khanate was founded by Genghis Khan's grandson, Jochi's son, Batu, a man whose actions and decisions had a decisive and long-term impact on the subsequent history of Eastern Europe, shaping its political, economic, and cultural development for centuries to come. Batu was not only an experienced and talented military leader, but also a far-sighted political leader who managed not only to preserve and retain in his hands the territories he inherited from his father, but also to significantly expand them, turning the Golden Horde into one of the most powerful states of his time. In the period from 1336 to 1341, under his skillful command, the Mongol troops carried out their famous Western campaign, during which they crushed and defeated the Russian principalities, Poland, Hungary, and came close to the very heart of Europe, plunging it into trepidation and horror. However, in 1341, after the sudden death of the great Khan Ugedei, Batu made a difficult but strategically important decision to stop his triumphal advance to the west and return to Mongolia to participate in resolving important issues concerning succession and the future development of the Mongol Empire. Returning from his victorious campaign, Batu founded a strong and centralized state on the conquered territories, known as the Golden Horde. He founded the city of Sarai Batu on the banks of the lower Volga, turning it into his capital in the heart of his new state. Later, after Batu's death, the capital of the Golden Horde was moved to the new city of Sarai Berke by his brother and successor, Khan Berke. Sarai Berke quickly became an important center of trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange between East and West, becoming a kind of bridge between different civilizations and cultures. It was this city that for many years became the heart of the Golden Horde, symbolizing its growing power and economic prosperity. But what was life like in the Golden Horde, and what influence did it have on the people surrounding it? The Golden Horde quite quickly transformed into a powerful state, stretching from Siberia and the Urals in the east to the Danube in the west, encompassing vast territories and uniting many different peoples and cultures under its rule. After the devastating capture of Kiev in 1340, the Russian lands finally fell under the rule of the Mongol Khans, becoming vassals of the Golden Horde. This period in the history of the Russian lands went down in the annals of history as the Mongol yoke, becoming a serious and tragic trial for Russia, which had a profound impact on its subsequent history. The Russian principalities were obliged to regularly pay the Khans of the Horde a significant tribute, which was called exit. The collection of taxes was carried out by Mongol officials known as baskaks, who strictly monitored the timely fulfillment of all obligations on the part of the Russian princes. Any failure or delay in payments immediately entailed severe penalties and punitive expeditions. These conditions for many years seriously weakened the economy of the Russian lands and significantly limited their independent development, slowing down their progress. However, the influence of the Horde on Russia was not exclusively destructive and negative. Thanks to the establishment of Mongol rule, the Great Silk Road was restored and stabilized, once again connecting Europe with the East, which contributed to the revitalization of trade and cultural exchange. Trade revived, and the Russian principalities gained access to new technologies, goods, and cultural achievements from distant China, Persia, and India, enriching their culture and economy. Goods previously completely unknown in Europe began to appear in the cities of Russia, which contributed to cultural exchange and further development. The Mongol authorities also indirectly contributed to the rise of Moscow, which later played a key role in the unification of the Russian lands. The Moscow princes managed to establish good relations with the Horde Khans and received from them the right to independently collect tribute from the Russian lands, which significantly strengthened their influence and power. Thanks to this, the Moscow Principality gradually strengthened its influence, turning into a center for the unification of Russian territories and in the future becoming the capital of a strong centralized state. The Mongol system of government, based on strict centralization of power and a rigid hierarchy, also had a significant impact on the political culture of Russia. Many elements of the Mongol administration, such as the tax system, military organization, and the order of territorial administration, were partially adopted by the Russian principalities, laying the foundations for a future centralized state which had a long-term impact on Russian statehood. The Golden Horde was not just another conqueror who came to the Russian land with fire and sword. It became a key element that determined the further development of Eastern Europe. For several centuries, the Horde acted as a kind of buffer between Europe and Asia, exerting a significant influence on cultural and political processes throughout the region. The peoples under its rule adopted certain elements of Mongol culture, which left an indelible mark on their subsequent history and mentality. But how long could this state of affairs continue? What awaited the Golden Horde in the future, and what factors led to its decline? Over time, however, the Golden Horde began to gradually weaken. By the end of the 14th century, the state began to suffer from internal conflicts and a fierce struggle for power, which ultimately led to its gradual disintegration into separate parts. In place of the once united horde, separate independent khanates arose: Kazan, Astrakhan, Crimean, and Siberian, each of which retained only part of the former greatness and legacy of Mongol rule, but none of them was ever able to restore the former power of the Golden Horde. Thus, the Golden Horde, founded by Batu, became a crucial part of the history of Eastern Europe, exerting a huge influence on its economy, culture, political system, and even the fates of the peoples who experienced this difficult historical trial. And although the state itself ultimately disappeared from the political map of the world, its influence continued to shape the development of the region for many centuries, leaving an indelible mark on history. Now, having thoroughly understood the history of the Golden Horde and its significance for Eastern Europe, we are finally ready to move on to the final part of our narrative, to talk about what Genghis Khan's legacy was and how it influenced the development of world history, shaping its course for many centuries to come. But before we summarize, let me ask you, are you ready to learn what lessons can be learned from the history of Genghis Khan and his empire, and why his name still causes so much controversy and discussion? Having thoroughly examined the history of the Golden Horde and its significant influence on the destinies of Eastern Europe, let us now turn our attention to another, no less important part of the once united and mighty Mongol Empire, where the legacy of Genghis Khan also played a crucial and defining role in the formation of a new state and civilization. We are talking about faraway and enigmatic China, where the grandson of the great conqueror, the famous and celebrated Kublai Khan, founded the new Yuan imperial dynasty, thereby opening a completely new and exciting chapter in the centuries-long history of Chinese civilization. Kublai was a worthy grandson of his great-grandfather Genghis Khan, the son of Tolui, the great Khan's youngest son, inheriting from his ancestors not only military prowess, but also an extraordinary mind for statesmanship. Even at a young age, he proved himself to be a talented and insightful politician and a skilled military leader, managing to unite under his rule a significant portion of his grandfather's vast legacy, creating a powerful and prosperous state. In 1271, Kublai officially proclaimed himself Chinese emperor, founding the new Mongol Yuan dynasty, which in Mongolian means original or foundational. This event was a truly significant and pivotal moment in Chinese history. For the first time in the country's long history, a dynasty founded by people who were not ethnic Chinese came to power, marking the beginning of a new era in Chinese civilization. Under Kublai Khan, the territory of the Chinese state expanded significantly, reaching its maximum size in the country's history. In 1279, he managed to finally subdue the southern Chinese Song dynasty, uniting under his rule almost all of China, from the northern steppes to the southern tropical forests. The new capital of the vast empire was built in Beijing, known at that time as Kanbalik or Dadu, becoming the center of the state's political and economic life. This city was built according to a strict plan, developed by the best architects and engineers of the time, becoming one of the greatest capitals of the medieval world, with wide streets, magnificent palaces, luxurious gardens, and majestic temples, which fully emphasized the greatness and power of the new Yuan Empire. But what helped Kublai Khan achieve such success, and what policies did he pursue within the country? Kublai pursued a wise and far-sighted policy aimed at bringing together Mongolian and Chinese cultures, striving to create a united society in which the traditions and customs of two great civilizations would be harmoniously combined. He tried to carefully preserve and respect ancient Chinese traditions, while simultaneously introducing Mongolian orders and customs, creating a unique cultural synthesis. The Yuan Empire became a unique historical phenomenon, combining the best achievements of Mongolian and Chinese civilizations, which allowed it to reach unprecedented prosperity. The state administration was built on the Chinese model with a powerful bureaucracy, a complex system of civil service exams for official positions, and a developed taxation system, which ensured effective management of the vast empire. At the same time, the Mongolian nobility held the highest state and military positions, which ensured their dominant position in the country and guaranteed the loyalty of the Mongolian elite. Kublai Khan became famous not only for his military and political successes, but also for his outstanding cultural achievements, which made his reign a golden age in Chinese history. He was a generous patron of science, art, and literature, and the best minds of his time, outstanding scientists, artists, and writers, gathered at his court. It was under him that China experienced a real flourishing of culture, science, and technology, reaching new heights in its development. Observatories, libraries, and academies were created, where scientists and thinkers from different countries worked, which contributed to the exchange of knowledge and ideas. Printing, gunpowder production, porcelain production, cartography, and medicine received a powerful impetus for development thanks to active state support, which led to the emergence of many new inventions and discoveries. Kublai Khan paid special attention to the development of trade and international relations, understanding their importance for the prosperity of the empire. Under him, the Silk Road was significantly strengthened, becoming not only a trade route, but also the most important artery of cultural exchange between East and West, which contributed to the spread of Chinese culture around the world. China at that time was open to foreigners, and merchants from all over the world could freely come to the Yuan Empire, trade, live, and work in it, enriching the country's culture and economy. One of Kublai Khan's most famous guests was a young Italian named Marco Polo. In the late 13th century, he arrived in China with his father and uncle, having traveled a long and dangerous journey along the Silk Road, full of adventures and unexpected encounters. Kublai warmly welcomed the travelers, bringing Marco Polo closer to his court and showing him all kinds of honors. Marco spent more than 17 years in China, carrying out the Khan's orders, visiting the most remote corners of the country and carefully studying its life and culture. Returning to Europe, Marco Polo wrote his famous book about the diversity of the world, better known as The Travels of Marco Polo. This book became the first detailed and vivid chronicle of mysterious and distant China, available to European readers, opening up a new and unexplored world for them. It was full of vivid descriptions of the riches and splendor of Chinese civilization, amazing inventions, and the unique way of life of the Chinese people, which amazed the imagination of Europeans. Marco Polo's book aroused great interest in the East among Europeans and inspired many subsequent generations of travelers and explorers, including Christopher Columbus, who later set off on his famous voyage, trying to find a shorter route to the legendary Eastern lands described by Marco Polo. But how long did the rule of the Yuan dynasty, founded by Kublai Khan, last? Was it able to maintain its greatness and prosperity for centuries, or did it suffer the fate of other great empires, which eventually declined? Despite impressive successes and transformations, the Yuan dynasty, founded by Kublai Khan, began its steady decline after his death in 1294 AD. The successors of the great Khan, unfortunately, did not inherit his outstanding management skills and political foresight. The Mongolian aristocracy, as if alienating itself from the indigenous Chinese population, increasingly exacerbated internal contradictions and social tensions. The tax burden became unbearably heavy for ordinary people, and outbreaks of peasant uprisings and growing discontent among the Chinese elite increasingly turned into open internal conflicts, undermining the power of the empire. In 1368 AD, the Chinese Ming dynasty, gathering strength, overthrew the rule of the Mongolian rulers, which marked the sad end of the short-lived Yuan dynasty. After the Mongol troops united vast territories of Eurasia under a single banner, a unique era began in history, which historians later dubbed Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace. This term, like a bright ray, emphasizes a period of unprecedented stability, the establishment of order, and active interaction between peoples who previously existed in relative isolation from each other, as if in different worlds. The Mongol Peace, which lasted approximately from the mid-13th to the mid-14th centuries, had a profound and indelible impact on all of Eurasia, transforming its political, economic, and cultural landscape. One of the most important achievements of the Pax Mongolica period was undoubtedly the creation of a safe and reliable trading system, which allowed merchants and travelers to move freely across vast territories. Prior to this time, trade routes, in particular the famous Silk Road, were subject to constant attacks by robbers and posed a source of serious danger to merchants and travelers. But the Mongols, having established their power over vast spaces, were able to provide effective protection and support to caravans traveling between remote regions such as China, Persia, Central Asia, Rus, and Europe. For the first time in centuries, merchants were able to safely cross vast distances, transporting precious goods such as exquisite Chinese silk, fragrant Indian spices, luxurious Persian fabrics, sparkling precious stones, healing medicines, and wise books. As a result, international trade flourished, connecting previously remote corners of the world into a single economic network. But what happens next? Travel became more frequent and accessible, as if opening up new horizons for merchants and diplomats who could now move freely throughout the empire without fear for their safety. During this period, like mushrooms after rain, numerous inns and postal stations, known as yam, appeared, where travelers could rest, change horses, and receive the latest information about the state of roads and routes. Thus, the Mongol authorities, without realizing it, contributed to the formation of the first system of international infrastructure and logistics in history, which became the prototype of modern trade routes and communications. An equally important and significant result of the Pax Mongolica was the active cultural and technological exchange between East and West, which enriched both sides with new knowledge and ideas. The Mongols, showing surprising tolerance and openness, encouraged contacts between scientists, artisans, and representatives of various religions, seeing this as an opportunity for mutual enrichment and progress. Chinese inventions such as gunpowder, paper, printing, and the compass were widely distributed throughout Eurasia for the first time, reaching Central Asia and even Europe, changing the course of history. Europeans, in turn, adopted many technologies and knowledge from the East, which later played a decisive role in the Renaissance, opening a new chapter in human history. In turn, Western craftsmen and scientists came to Asia, bringing their knowledge and crafts, thereby enriching local cultures and contributing to their development. One of the most striking examples of this cultural exchange was undoubtedly the activity of Marco Polo, an Italian merchant and traveler who spent many years at the court of Kublai Khan, becoming his confidant and advisor. His detailed and colorful descriptions of China and Asian peoples inspired many Europeans to new journeys and explorations, opening up an undiscovered world for them. But Marco Polo was only one of many travelers and explorers who moved along Eurasian routes during this period, exchanging not only goods, but also ideas, philosophical concepts, and scientific knowledge. Diplomats, missionaries, merchants, artisans, and adventurers constantly crisscrossed the Eurasian roads, enriching cultures and promoting progress. So what went wrong? However, despite all its achievements and positive consequences, the period of Pax Mongolica turned out to be relatively short-lived, like a bright comet that flashed across the historical sky. By the mid-14th century, the mighty Mongol Empire began to disintegrate into separate parts, like a house of cards, losing its strength and unity. The reasons for this were numerous and interconnected, creating a complex tangle of problems and contradictions. First, the vast territory of the empire itself proved too difficult to be effectively managed by a single central authority. Regional rulers and khanates gradually became more and more independent, which led to internal conflicts, discord, and a fierce struggle for power. This, in turn, significantly weakened the stability and security of the empire, undermining its foundations. Second, the Mongol nobility gradually became distanced from the local population, especially in China, Central Asia, and Eastern Europe, as if erecting a wall of misunderstanding and alienation between themselves. Harsh tax policies, increasing corruption among Mongol officials, and constant abuses of power caused mass discontent and led to numerous uprisings and revolts that shook the empire from within. In China, for example, a wave of peasant uprisings broke out, which ultimately led to the overthrow of the Mongol Yuan dynasty and the rise to power of the Chinese Ming dynasty in the year 1368, putting an end to Mongol rule in the Celestial Empire. Third, one of the main reasons for the collapse of the Pax Mongolica was epidemics and natural disasters, which seriously undermined the economic and demographic stability of the empire, as if dealing it a fatal blow. The most devastating of these epidemics was the famous Black Death, or bubonic plague, which spread along trade routes from Asia to Europe, sowing death and devastation. It was the Mongol trade routes and the high mobility of the population that contributed to the rapid spread of the disease, which swept across Eurasia and led to the deaths of millions of people, causing a deep crisis in all regions affected by the epidemic. So what remained after the fall of the empire? Finally, a fourth and perhaps equally important reason for the decline was the gradual degradation of the Mongol army, which, as if losing its edge, could no longer endlessly maintain the discipline and high level of military training that distinguished it during its heyday. Military campaigns, as if losing their former brilliance, became less and less successful, and internal conflicts and strife among military leaders intensified, which also contributed to the gradual weakening and disintegration of the unified Mongol state, depriving it of its former power and strength. After the unified Mongol Empire, like a huge building, collapsed, and the era of Pax Mongolica ended, the fates of the numerous Mongol states diverged, like ships caught in a storm, and a completely new and unpredictable historical period began. The Mongol Khanates, like splintered fragments of past grandeur, became independent and gradually began to integrate into local cultures and societies, changing their identity but leaving behind a deep and indelible mark on the history of Eurasia. However, already at the end of the 14th century, Mongol conquest traditions unexpectedly revived, like a phoenix from the ashes, in the person of the famous commander and conqueror Timur, known in Europe as Tamerlane. Despite the fact that Timur himself was not a direct descendant of Genghis Khan, he positioned himself as his spiritual heir, as if continuing his great work, setting himself the goal of restoring the greatness of Mongol conquests and returning the empire to its former glory. Timur, like a native of two worlds, came from the Turkic-Mongol environment of Central Asia, and his political and military culture was closely connected with the Mongol heritage, which allowed him to successfully continue the traditions of the great conquerors. Timur began a series of large-scale conquests, covering vast territories from Central Asia to Persia, the Caucasus, and even the borders of Eastern Europe and India, as if striving to recreate the empire of Genghis Khan on a new scale. He united the disparate states of Central Asia under his rule, creating a new powerful empire with its capital in Samarkand, turning it into a center of political and cultural life. The city of Samarkand, like a pearl of the East, became under Timur the most important cultural and political center of Eurasia, prosperous and known for its magnificent architectural structures, scientists, artists, and poets, attracting the best minds from all over the world. However, Timur's empire, despite its conquests and cultural prosperity, lasted a relatively short time, like a bright flash that quickly faded on the historical horizon. Already soon after Timur's death in the year 1405, his state began to disintegrate into parts due to internal conflicts and the struggle for power between his heirs, eager to divide his empire. Thus gradually ended the last major attempt to revive the Mongol conquest traditions, leaving behind only memories of past greatness. And the peoples of Central Asia, as if freed from a heavy burden, began to return to the former diversity of independent states and khanates, striving for independence and prosperity. Meanwhile, in the territory of the former Mongol possessions in Eastern Europe, especially in the Russian lands, significant changes were also taking place, as if marking a new era. The Golden Horde, as if falling apart, disintegrated into several independent states: the Kazan, Astrakhan, Crimean, and Siberian khanates, each of which went its own way. These khanates, as if absorbing the surrounding influences, gradually integrated into the cultural environment of neighboring peoples and gradually lost their purely Mongol identity, acquiring features of Turkic and Muslim cultures, which led to the formation of unique cultural formations. In the 16th century, many of these khanates were conquered by the Russian Tsardom, as if falling under its powerful wing, and their territories became part of the Russian state, expanding its borders and strengthening its influence. The Mongol legacy, nevertheless, remained in the language, culture, customs, and even in the political organization of the peoples inhabiting these lands, reminiscent of the times of past dominance. In China, after the overthrow of the Yuan dynasty in the year 1368 and the rise to power of the Chinese Ming dynasty, Mongol influence gradually diminished, as if receding under the onslaught of the new power. The Mongol rulers were driven back to the steppes, as if returning to their origins, where they continued to exist in the form of separate tribes and small states, but were never able to restore their former unity and power, losing their former luster. Nevertheless, the Mongol heritage had a lasting impact on Chinese culture and state structure, leaving a mark on the taxation system, military organization, and even on some elements of everyday life and culture, continuing to remind of the time when the Mongols ruled the Celestial Empire. In Mongolia itself, after the collapse of the empire, a period of fragmentation and internecine strife began, as if plunging into the darkness of turmoil and chaos. Mongolia became the scene of constant clashes between various nomadic tribes who fought for pastures and power, preventing the country from gaining stability and prosperity. This fragmentation continued until the 17th century, when the Mongol lands were subdued by the Manchu Qing dynasty, finally completing the era of the independent Mongol state and putting an end to its independence. Despite the loss of political influence, the Mongol legacy in Eurasia turned out to be incredibly deep and lasting, as if leaving an indelible imprint on the history of many peoples. In Central Asia, the Mongol conquest and the rule of Timur left a rich architectural and cultural heritage, manifested in the majestic buildings of Samarkand and Bukhara, testifying to the high level of development of culture and art in that era. In the Russian lands, the Mongol yoke seriously influenced the formation of a centralized state, the administrative system, and culture, having a significant impact on the further course of history. Even in China, where the memory of the Yuan dynasty has been preserved as a complex and ambiguous period, the influence of the Mongol period remained in the development of infrastructure, trade routes, and cultural exchange with the West, contributing to the progress and development of the country. Thus, the subsequent fate of the Mongol states after the collapse of Genghis Khan's empire was diverse and complex, full of ups and downs, triumphs and tragedies. Mongol influence gradually integrated into other cultures and traditions, leaving a significant mark on the history of many peoples, as if dissolving into their cultural code. And although the political unity created by Genghis Khan was never repeated, his legacy proved to be long-lasting, alive, and tangible for many centuries, continuing to remind the world of the great era of Mongol conquests and their impact on world history. But, as they say, that's another story altogether.